Everybody stand, we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, this is a special meeting, but we're going to run the meeting kind of like we do the rest of them, so I'm going to go ahead and go over the rules and requirements. You had a sign-in sheet on the back, and then on that sign-in sheet there's some paper that you can write questions down, and then we'll try to cycle through this thing and give you the opportunity to ask questions towards the end of the meeting. But if you wish to speak or ask a question, you fill out the form on the reception table, return it to the table, or give it to the secretary or chairman. I would suggest that we probably should give it to Shirley. That way she can, we can kind of keep up with it as the meeting's going, and we'll know farther questions and what they look like, that sort of thing. The chairman will address questions or comments after the agenda is complete, formally in the new business section. Of course, this is a special meeting, so it'll be different. Meetings normally last about 2 hours. You wait until the chair recognizes you before you talk. Limit your comment or question to 3 minutes unless the chair specifically extends your time. Where two or more represent or share common interest, only one will be designated to speak for a total of 5 minutes. Where good cause, the chairman may extend that time limit. Speakers are not allowed to assign his or her time or any part of their time to another speaker. A member of the public speaking on any matter shall confine him or herself to the question or matter before the board, shall not use unbecoming, abusive, or unparliamentary language, and shall avoid commenting on personalities or character of any board member, former board trustees, other officials, staff, or the public. The board reserves the right to have the Clay County Sheriff's Department remove an individual or individuals who fail to meet this request. Address your questions and comments only to the chairman and not to a specific trustee or individual in the meeting. Trustees can only respond to an individual if the chairman requests. A person who decides to appeal any decision made by the board with respect to any matter considered at the meeting is advised that this person will need a record of the proceedings, and that accordingly the person may need to ensure that a verbatim record of the proceedings is made, including the testimony and evidence upon which the appeal is based. The district attorney, district accountant, engineering advisory group may be requested by the chairman to speak at any time for advice, suggestions, or information. Board meetings are audio recorded and posted on the board website after the meeting's over. So I guess officially we're in the mode. So are you recording now?
Yes.
Okay. There's also a way you can submit questions, and that's by email to the district.secretary@lancer.com. Trustees, I doubt that we're going to get into voting tonight, but if we do, all trustees, including board officers, must vote. Trustee with a conflict of interest regarding business before the board must declare the conflict with the chair before the vote. District attorney may be consulted on the issue. If a trustee needs to leave early, the trustee needs to advise the chair. Important issue may need to be moved up for discussion earlier for approval or vote. So that is the basic stuff that we normally cover, and we try to cover. So we've done a roll call, introduced the advisory group, we've done the pledge, we've gone through the rules. This is a special meeting, and so it's not a meeting for any other purpose other than to talk with our prospective engineering group for our dam revitalization process and that sort of thing. We approved back in February a request for quote qualifications. The advisory group helped with preparing that, and then we advertised that, and the deadline for responding to it was March 23rd. We got, and everybody knows this, or well, most people know it, but it's worth repeating. We were impressed with the submittal, so that's the good news. That's why they're here. Hanson is here. The bad news is we only got one proposal. So, you know, you'd like to have more than one proposal in anything you do, whether it's buying an automobile or your wife buying a pair of shoes, even though she doesn't ask you about it, Amazon just delivers it. But that's what we've got. When we looked and had a discussion at our last board meeting, we said, gee, this proposal looks good, but we need to meet each other. So we need to meet them. They need to meet us. Because this is not a quick project and not a cheap project. And it's got to be a lot of details in it, how to work out the real scope and the timing and the dollars and all that kind of stuff. But we're not to that point yet. What we're here for tonight is to have them make a little bit of a presentation on their qualifications so that we can get more comfortable with them than we are now. We're comfortable enough to bring them in, and we voted on doing that at our last board meeting. Now we determine, do we want to go forward? But when I say we want to go forward, that's not just us as the board. I mean, these guys still have to say something. Now, they've spent some time and effort and money and discussions and all that to get to this point. So they've already invested some, and so I'm sure that, you know, if they were just totally not liking what they saw and all that, then they wouldn't be here. And quite frankly, one of our advisory group guys, Walt, with Black and Veatch, he knows these people. He knows their background. He's been a great asset to us on the advisory group. Mike Kelter knows a lot about our situation here at Lake Ashbury, and Mike has looked through the information too, and but he doesn't really know that much about the background and that sort of thing. But he knows about the projects, and he was involved when we did the project on the South Lake in 2013. So Mike has offered a lot of comments about how we ought to be thinking about this from our standpoint, from a board standpoint. But I think the main thing that I wanted to get across is we go through a little bit of presentation, and we get to know them a little bit better, and then there are some people on the board that have submitted questions that they would like to ask, and so after their presentation and discussions, then we can go into that sort of a thing in a rotation basis. You know, I don't want to be me being up here for an hour asking my questions, and then we finally get to Larry Pence at 11 o'clock. I don't want to do that. So we'll go through and we'll try to limit it 3, 4, 5 minutes, per person. So if you can get through all of your questions in that 5-minute time frame, fine. All right, but if you can't, then we'll skip on to somebody else. And if you didn't have any questions that you submitted and you want to ask any, then certainly you're a board member like the rest of us. You have the opportunity to do that. If you want to ask other questions that come to mind, or that you just didn't put down at the first cut, then that's fine too. The main purpose is to get our questions answered so that we got a better comfort level of what's going on. The same way with the people from the community. I mean, we've got to give you time, and if we're dragging it on too long with the board standpoint, I'm going to cut it off and interject the community comments too. And I'm not going to do it at 10 o'clock either. So we as a board need to be cognizant of that's our objective too, is to do that. The people here at the front table are somewhat from Hanson, but not totally. Brian Wozniak? Yep. Brian is going to be the project manager if we go forward with this, and so Brian's kind of the head guy. I'll let him introduce the other people. There's another guy, though, and he can comment on this too, so I'm not trying to steal his thunder either, but Kelly Smith is the guy that's supposed to be here tonight, and he's... No. Kelly,
Ken Avery.
Kenneth Avery, yeah. Kelly Smith is right up here with Kimley Horn, right? And she's the person that's probably going to be the one that gets the most attention because she works with money, finances, grants, that sort of thing. And I know that even though that wasn't in our original request for qualifications, you know, they're not going to take on a project like this. They know, and I've told them recently that we had a referendum pass in October, middle of October, that takes the fees from $600 up to $2,400. Didn't say it goes to 24, but it can go up to 2,400. And so Janet has been working from the board standpoint on grants and things like that, but they have a lot of expertise, and Kelly will talk about that. Kenneth Avery was the guy we were talking about, and I just skipped on that. So he's not here. He probably won't make it either way.
Correct.
Okay. So that's okay. But we've got Kelly. I've already introduced her, I guess, by accident. Brian, and then Justin Dewey. All right. So if you'd tell us a little bit about yourself and the company and who's going to be involved in the project. I think I already said you're going to be the project manager, Brian. But anything that you want to say, remember the board has looked at your presentation, but we've not distributed that anywhere. And so that the community people that are here really don't know a whole lot other than, hey, we got somebody that's interested in becoming our engineering firm and working with us on improving this whole thing. So when you do you can go through some introduction stuff and any comments you want to make, and then we can get into asking some questions. I submitted the questions that were submitted to me. I forwarded those on to Steve Alms. I'm sure you've got those. And so it'll be somewhat of an informal dialogue is what I hope to get. But I hope that everybody that's in here will walk away with either a pretty comfortable feeling or serious concerns. If there's serious concerns, then they need to be brought up too, you know, from your standpoint or ours. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Brian. If that's okay.
All right. First, we want to thank the board for inviting us here, looking through our proposal, and selecting us as your top firm. We appreciate that. But no, I'm just kidding. We've got we put together a team of firms because we know there's a lot of aspects of dam safety and improvements that need to be done. So it's Hanson will be the prime consultant that will contract directly with the district, and then we're also, as part of our team, bringing on Kinley-Horn and Bergman to assist us. Kinley-Horn would be responsible for doing public outreach and grant funding, and Bergman, Kenneth Avery was going to be here and join us today, but Bergman would be our dam safety official and also in charge of permitting. So they had a big piece with that. Hanson, our role would be project management and hydrology and hydraulics, which Justin would lead the hydrology and hydraulics. Our intention for this meeting was not to have a formal presentation. We didn't put together a PowerPoint, bring a projector to show a bunch of slides or anything. We just thought we would hit the highlights that we put together in our proposal and answer the questions. We were provided with quite a few written questions from the board after they read the proposal. And when we saw those questions, we saw how they tie in nicely with our project approach. What we did bring is a one-page summary here. On the front, it just gives you an introduction to us up at the front of the table. But on the back is some key information that we took out of the proposal. And on the left side are tasks and deliverables. That's basically our project approach. And so our format here that I intend to go through is to give a background on our firms, but then run through our project approach for what we see are the key points. And within those, we can answer the written questions that we received for the proposal. And then you also have on the back a list of our organization chart and then some ways that we may include for project outreach. So I'll direct you to that. When you look at the team that we put together, we were careful in selecting a team that makes sure that we can answer all of the questions related to dam safety, dam safety design, hydrology, hydraulics, geotechnical, structural, civil, permitting, public outreach, grant funding. All of these are going to need to, these disciplines will need to come together for a project such as this. So having Bergman and Kimley Horn and Hanson together, between the three of our firms, we put together a very strong single team that can do this project. In addition to Kimley Horn and Bergman, we also have Hyatt Surveying, to do some surveying services for field work, and CSI Geo to do any geotechnical explorations that may be needed. And all of our firms, we have offices in Jacksonville, so we individually, all of our companies are pretty much nationwide, but we have people in Jacksonville between Bergman, Kimley Horn, and Hanson, and CSI Geo that can service this project. So I thought what we would do is I'll go over my role and my background as an individual, same for Kelly and Justin, so you can get to know who we are and our experience and our professional growth. We can talk a little bit about the team that we put together, and then go through our approach to the project and answer the questions that the board has provided to us. So I'll just start off with myself. I'm Brian Wozniak. I'll serve as your project manager. I work for Hanson. My role will be to administer the project, put together the scope, the schedule, the fee, the staffing. I'll work with internal coordination with our project team and externally with the board, also with regulatory agencies. And the main purpose will be to, once we have a scope and schedule developed, we'll have a project management plan in place, a communications plan in place. We'll be able to meet with the district regularly to ensure that we are on schedule and maintaining our scope. As new information comes in and we need to deviate or make an adjustment here or there, or make an inclusion for a new directive, we can coordinate that with the district and make adjustments that you will understand and you will agree to. We don't plan to make any changes once our path forward has been laid out in front of you without your consent. So it's going to be a collaborative effort between the district and our team, where we're not going to put together a scope of services that's not going to meet your expectations. We're going to rely on you to provide information to us and to make decisions in a timely manner, and together we'll work through the process moving forward. So my background is I'm a civil engineer. I got my degree in 1991 from Ohio State. I initially started working out of college for the state of Illinois, working for the Illinois Department of Natural Resources, the Office of Water Resources. We did flood control projects primarily. We did watershed studies. We would go out to local municipalities that had flooding problems. As the state entity, we would come in and offer them basically free engineering. We would model any flooding problem they had due to watershed. We would come up with a plan to solve their flooding problem, and then we would even pay half of the cost to do the construction. So we had a cost sharing program. So it was a good background for me to get into, and I also got to work on one dam while I was with the state. There was some property that we acquired, and we wanted to put on a recreational lake. So that was my first experience with dam design, was in that role. I then went out to Colorado and worked for a small private firm, again doing more flood control type projects. And then I came to Hanson in 2010. And with Hanson, I've gotten a lot more exposure to dam design and dam evaluation. I worked on Lake Springfield Dam, doing the emergency action plan, Lake Decatur, Evergreen Lake, Lake Bloomington, Camlara Park Dam, Miller Park Dam, and one thing I wanted to highlight on Miller Park Dam, we didn't have that in our proposal, but Miller Park Dam is a municipal dam in a park in Bloomington, Illinois, and it had a lot of seepage issues. The city was maintaining the dam, and when they were mowing the exterior, the downstream face of the dam, the tractor was running up a lot of material and sinking in and getting hitting a soggy area. So we went out there, they hired Hanson, we went out there, we evaluated the dam, looked at the plans, got some survey, and came up with a really pragmatic plan to halt the seepage. The city put that in place. That dam's been fine, but that's as far as a similar type of a project from my experience, that would be the one that would be most online with probably what we're seeing out here with your dam complex. And then currently working on a couple dam projects right now with Hanson. One is the S353 Spillway. It's a dam owned by Southwest Florida Water Management District over in Citrus County. We're fixing some structural damage to the spillway on that one, and also working on a dam project in Texas. There was it's called Green Lake Dam. About a year ago, it actually failed, and we were hired on as a consultant to do the design for a replacement dam. And at this point, we've got the design close to finish, and we're working through permitting over in Texas. So we have quite a bit of experience. Myself, and as a firm, we have even more experience with evaluating dams and doing dam safety projects. So that's some of my background. I'll turn over to Justin. Justin also works at Hanson, and he'll have a significant role in this project.
Yeah, like you said, my name is Justin Dewey. I've been with Hanson for 7 years. I've been working since 2001. I got my master's and bachelor's degree from Tennessee Tech, which is Cookeville, Tennessee, about an hour and a half north of Chattanooga. Beautiful country, if you ever get a chance to visit it. But in my master's research project was a stormwater retrofit of a dry detention basin, so a water quality project essentially. So since that point, I've been a drainage and water resources guy. Could not get away from it. In 2001, when I sat down at the first company I worked for, I started on a project out in Texas, I-10, 610. It's not relevant to this, but it's a giant multi-level interchange. So I worked on projects like that since 2001. I worked on the New South Runway at Fort Lauderdale. It's a $1 billion construction project. I've worked on single culvert replacements. So I've got a huge range of experience, and all of those permitted through just about every water management district in Florida. I've got a really great working relationship with several of the reviewers of the water management district, including Cammy Blue, who I spoke with her quite a bit about this project. But getting back to my more relevant experience to this, before Hanson, I worked at the Jacks District of the Army Corps, and I worked with them. They called me an engineering technical lead, which is sort of like a project manager, but without the financial part of it. Anyways, I was working on the Herbert Hoover Dike rehab project, and I was overseeing the construction and spec deliverables for 4 different culvert projects. They call these are multi-barrel culverts with gated controls on upstream and downstream ends, and beyond that, we did a flood control project in Rio Puerto Nuevo, the one that was there, which is sectioned off and actually under construction right now. At Hanson, I've worked on a lot of different projects, more on the H&H side though. So several airports, I've done drainage design for them, and worked on several stormwater master plans for cities like Atlantic Beach and Jacksonville Beach. We're doing a good bit of work with Jacksonville Beach right now with their stormwater capital improvement program. So that's me kind of.
And one other thing Justin didn't highlight on his resume is he's currently the chairman for the ACEC Florida St. Johns River Water Management District Committee. So he deals quite a bit directly with the Water Management District, and that's who one of the primary permitting agencies is going to be for any work done on the dams in this area.
Yeah, for those that don't know, ACEC is a professional society that kind of, the role is to communicate between regulatory agencies like the Water Management District and the governing bodies like the government in Tallahassee, mostly state government, obviously. That subcommittee allows us to interface with the regulatory reviewers and agency or policy makers on that side.
Okay. And then we have Kelly Smith with Kinley Horn.
Thank you. So I've had a bad bout of allergies, and so I'm going to try to get through this without having to excuse myself. But if I do, it's just to go cough. So I'm Kelly Smith with Kinley Horn. I'm a Jacksonville native. I work out of our Jacksonville office. I received an environmental engineering degree from North Carolina State. I've been working my entire career in the state of Florida. Primarily in the Southwest Florida. However, once I had my daughter, I came back to be closer to my family, and I've been up in this area for about 4 years. My projects vary. They primarily address wet infrastructure, but it can vary from utility-related projects with water, wastewater, a dredge that's a part of a public amenity, or large pump stations. The main focus of much of my experience has been on infrastructure renewal within neighborhoods and communities. So while my technical expertise may be more on the design of these, every project and program that I've been a part of, the majority of them have been more affiliated with community improvements. And so Kinley Horn is supporting the team here by offering our services to support community and stakeholder engagement, which is something that I will be personally leading, as well as the grant funding. So I actually am not a grant writer. However, we have 6 grant writers in the state of Florida, and most of the projects that I deliver require the additional funding and the need to secure grants or loans or even appropriations. So I work with our grants team in preparation for this conversation, and if there's questions as we get into this that I can't answer, I can always take that back. But one thing too about this team here is that we actually, the 3 companies, Kinley Horn, Hanson, and Bergman, actually operate under a joint venture and are currently in the process of serving the Jacksonville District of the Army Corps. So while we're separate entities working here, I'm working under Hanson. This team has been established for 2.5 years. And so we're very committed to delivering projects, water resources projects. All of our firms have a focus on community-based infrastructure programs, and we're just glad to be here and to get to know you.
Yeah, and that's directly the reason why we're here as the 3 firms that we are. We've been working together in our pursuit for the Jacksonville Army Corps of Engineers contract. And we put together a joint venture. So what a joint venture is our 3 firms have signed a contract where we basically function as one firm for that contract. On our contract here with the district, we're essentially 3 independent firms, but we've worked together quite a bit on other projects. So with the district, Hanson will be the prime, and Kinley Horn and Bergman will be subs to Hanson. But with the core contract, we're all working together basically as a new entity. We call it KHB for Kinley Horn, Hanson, Bergman. And when we submitted on that core contract, the reason we all came together was because with the Army Corps contract, we were competing against all the big firms, the Black and Beaches, the AEComs, the Jacobs. But the large firms out there, and we are quite a bit smaller, so we combined our resources together. And in that pursuit, we were actually ranked by the Corps as the #1 firm in that contract. So we were just getting started in 2022 with new projects under that contract, and we thought that was definitely worth bringing up, that at least the Corps recognizes our experience. And a lot of the information that was in this proposal came from what work we put together for the Corps proposal as well. So, and our 4th member of our team who's not here is Ken Avery. He had travel issues, and I would ask you not to hold that against us, but I wouldn't blame you if you did. We should all be here. Ken's background, he's been working in dam safety. He's got on here, it shows, my eyes, it shows 46 years experience. So he's been doing this forever, and he really brings a lot of strength to our team as far as how to address dam safety issues and permitting, and come up with proper design that can help to mitigate the problems that you have. So I'm sorry that he couldn't make it, but he is a vital part of our team as well. So I'll give a little bit of project understanding, what we know, and then what our approach is to the project. What we've looked at, you guys have a lot of good information on your website. So we got on there and read through a lot of the reports. There's been several studies that have been done, a lot of projects that you've done. So we know that the dams were constructed in 1965. We know that the district was formed in, I think it was 1986 by the state. And your primary task was to operate and maintain the dams. In I believe it was 1990, somewhere around there, you had problems with the drawdown pipes. They had some structural issues, so you lined those with HDPE liners, and then you backfilled the void area between the liner and the pipe with grout. So that was done around 1990. And then around 2013, I think on the South Dam, you guys put in a overflow spillway with the two culverts, and then the ACB rundown chute that goes into the North Lake. You also had some issues that were noted with the drawdown valves not working, but those have been fixed. And so I guess the point of all it is that a lot of work has been done. You guys have been maintaining the facilities. But in the recent dam assessment, some additional deficiencies have been noted that we saw in there that are going to need to be addressed through additional projects. We saw that the most concerning one was related to the drawdown pipes. There were several comments in the reports saying that there was some concern about piping along the pipes. There was piping with cracks leading water to get into the pipe, not through the inlet of the pipe, but actually going through the dam soil and then entering the pipe through cracks within the liner. There were also a note in one of the inspections that water would be in the pipe flowing full. It would actually exit not through the outlet of the pipe, which appeared to be blocked, but was building up pressure and leaking through cracks in the pipe into the dam soil and then coming out through the soil. None of those things are good from a dam perspective. When dams fail, they fail either through piping failure, where you have some paths that are going through the soil of the embankment, and as water goes through there, it can carry fine particles of soil with it, and over time, as that continues to happen, the hole gets bigger and bigger, more and more water comes through. Eventually, if not addressed, someday it will lead to failure. The other way is overtopping. If more water comes into the dam than can pass through your spillway and your emergency spillway, it will overtop the dam. You have a earthen dam embankment that's vegetated with grass that can only withstand so much water running over it with the high velocities that it's going to see, and eventually that will lead to, if it happens long enough, that will lead to eroding, and that also could eventually lead to a dam failure. So there are definitely issues that need to be addressed. Some smaller ones were trees on the dam. You don't want to have any large woody vegetation established on your dam embankment, because the roots from that, I'll say a large tree, for example, would have large roots going through and penetrating the soil. Once those trees die, they rot, they end up leaving a void in the soil. And that's just another avenue for water to work its way through and again, start to move material and eventually lead to problems. So those things have all been noted. They're all recorded in the reports, and so we've taken that information and we recognize that, and we think that we have the experience and expertise to address these types of problems with some projects. But we also know that any project that's going to undertake is going to be extremely expensive when you're working on dams. It's a high-risk construction environment, and with the high risk and the issues involved, it always leads to high construction costs. So that was the main reason that we included grant funding in our proposal, is because we recognize you are a smaller special district, and the cost for that could be overburdensome on your finances. So we think that there are definitely some programs within the state and within the federal agencies out there that your district should qualify for. We're hopeful, and that would be one of our first tasks is to address that. One thing we noticed too in the report, there was an Army Corps of Engineer report about the status of dams all the way back in 1978. So the dams were only 13 years old at that time. And in those Army Corps of Engineers reports, they noted that the conditions of the dams were ranked primarily unsatisfactory or poor at that time, and largely because it appears that the hydraulic capacity of the dams were all designed for around a 100-year flood event, which seems like quite a bit. But from a dam perspective, that's really undersized. Current standards, if you were to design a new dam today, it would for a high hazard dam, where high hazard means that there's a potential for loss of life in the event of a dam failure. So for high hazard dams, the current design standard is to pass a PMF, which is a probable maximum flood. And a probable maximum flood, I would define that as it's basically a flood of biblical proportions. It's what meteorologists have defined as the maximum amount of moisture in the atmosphere that could be squeezed out of the atmosphere most it's physically possible. And that's what our current design standards are for dams with high hazard in the United States. You know, we're very risk averse. Public safety is the highest priority in the engineering field, so we do everything we can to minimize risk for loss of life, and the regulations reflect that. So if you look at a 100-year design rainfall, which is what the dams were designed for, that's about 11 inches of rainfall in a 24-hour period. If you look at a PMF level rainfall, that's 47 inches of rain in a 24-hour period. So you can see just from the magnitude of the size of the storms, the difference of how much undersized the hydraulic capacity is of the dam. So we know that's what we're working with. That's our understanding of the project. There's existing issues structurally and within the material of the embankment of the dams, the seepage issues, and we also know there's capacity issues. That the dam cannot pass the required amount of runoff that it needs. So, with that, my plan is to run through our project approach, which is basically highlighted on the back of the handout on the left side, the tasks and deliverables. We put together 7 tasks in a logical order of how we see that the project would move forward. And as I run through these, I printed out a list of all the questions that were provided to us from the board. And I do have a question for Ken. Okay. The question for Ken is, sorry, I've taken my glasses off. It says your projects reflect design efficiencies, primarily with concrete structures. Please provide us with an expanded insight on how you will timely complete a project with earthen dams, since it appears you have no experience with earthen dams. So I guess in part that's an error on our part in our proposal. We did highlight a lot of our dam experience on projects that we had worked together as firms. And those dam projects, a lot of those were concrete dams. We also have some further in our proposal, some additional projects that are earthen dams in there. But Ken was going to address numerous earthen dams that we've worked on. It's not that we don't have experience with earthen dams. It just happens that the 5 projects that we listed as our primary examples maybe didn't hit that point. That's one of the reasons I wanted to mention the Miller Park Dam. That's a smaller dam that had seepage issues similar to some of the issues that you're facing here. Our goal for any approach to a project is going to be pragmatic, keep it as simple and cost effective as possible, but it needs to meet the standards for dam safety. So I'll move on from there. Our first task is project administration management, and quality control. So that's a lot of the work that I said that I would do as the project manager. That's establishing what's our scope going to be, what are our initial tasks going to be, who's going to do what. We're going to lay all that out. We're going to put together a schedule, a critical path method, so that we can see what needs to be done in what order and what's associated with moving the project forward. We would put together our project management plan, our communication plan, quality control plan, risk register. We put all those in a draft form, and then we would want to meet with the board at that point to go over what we think needs to be done and what we expect to do in the project, but also to get your feedback. I know one of the comments coming up here was about communication plan. So that would be part of our project management plan, but we would also want your input to the communication. Obviously, that is a concern for at least one board member, so we would welcome feedback on that. We would throw something out there, like I would expect. We would put together a monthly project update memo and provide that to you each month. That memo would contain the work that we've done over the past month, where we're at now. We would have the schedule laid out with where we're at on that schedule, and then the work we expect to do, what are our next steps over the next month. And then each one of those memos would feed, and that would give a documented timeline of what we've done and where we're going, information we find out. Anything that needs to be adjusted along the way, that would be an opportunity to communicate with you and make those adjustments. So let's see, I had some questions related to this task. One question was annually, how many projects does your firm schedule? What is your percentage of projects not completed as scheduled? And what are the reasons for not completing projects on schedule? So with that, I would guess, based on my experience at Hanson, as we do projects, each project gets a number. So I'm just familiar with that standpoint. We have 6 markets, we have certain numbers. I combine that and I would guess we do typically between 500 and 1,000 projects every year, just based on that accounting in my head. As far as how many of those are not completed on schedule, I would say very few of them are not completed on schedule, and one reason for that is the schedule itself. We'll lay out an initial schedule at the start of the project based on what we assume information will come in and how the project moves forward. But as information comes in and the project is bound to deviate, there's going to be wiggles in the road, and we'll need to coordinate with you on that. So as we get a new piece of information, we find out, hey, we assumed that this was going to take 2 weeks for the Water Management District to review this piece. They're taking 4 weeks. So we need to make an adjustment to the schedule because of that. We won't make any adjustments to the schedule because we anticipated we would have 2 staff working on it. One of them got sick, so we only have 1 we need to stretch. But that's not a valid reason to adjust the schedule from our standpoint. But anything external to that is, and schedules always get adjusted along the way. But in the end, that final schedule that gets laid out is typically the one that gets met because there's only a few steps left at the end to meet the schedule. So I don't know if that exactly answers the question ideally, but we will lay out what we think is a reasonable schedule and do everything we can to meet that. And typically we do with our project. Another question we received related to the project administration is, please expand on your communication process with the board. I hit on this a little bit earlier. We will have a communication plan. I expect we'll give you, I expect we'll do the monthly memo and do something like that. We can attend the board meetings as often as you would like us to. You can invite us. I don't know how often you guys meet.
We meet monthly?
Monthly. You can invite us to every monthly meeting. We can do that, or every other one, or just as certain deliverables are required to go over. Every time we have a key deliverable in the schedule, we expect that we'll come to the board and present that to you, so that you're aware and can see the progress and be aware of what we learned and what needs to be. What information needs to be acquired to move forward. And then we We can have Teams meetings. I know your board, but maybe with the, a special committee that you form or something, we get a weekly Teams meeting. Emails, I still like that as a great resource for communication because it's a documented communication. So you have the emails, you can file that, and that's a historical reference to the communication. Another question we had from the board was, how flexible is your work process? How flexible and articulate are you on projects scaling up or down, changing direction, communicating that to the board? So I think, we're going to be highly flexible. Our approach to the project would be, we'll lay out the first task in detail, and then generally lay out the additional tasks that will follow that. But what we would want to do is take this project a piece at a time. So our initial task, which will be task 2, deals with grants, investigations, field surveys, and what we've listed on there is preliminary design. And that's as far as the details go, because we don't know what we're going to find out from that initial effort. So we would say, here's our first step. We're going to lay out the schedule and the process for that in detail with you. Let's get through that. Let's see what we learn. And then we'll lay out our next step, which will be task 3, the design documentation preparation. Then we'll know more what we need to do at that next phase. So our entire process, just based on that alone, is based on flexibility. So that leads me to task 2, which, as I said, that's grants, investigations, field surveys, and preliminary design. I'm going to let Kelly talk about grants right now, just so I can stop talking for a little bit and let somebody else talk.
All right, so early on in the project, it's really important that we develop a dynamic strategy for identifying and targeting and submitting grant applications. As I said, we have several grant writers from the state of Florida. I met with 2 of them in preparation for this discussion, and we've identified 7 potential opportunities that we would recommend targeting. Now, applying for a grant can only occur once the notification of the funding opportunity has been listed. So of the 7 that I'm looking at right now, none of those have notifications open. And a handful of them, we have an idea of the typical cycle of what to expect. However, 4 of these are under the bipartisan infrastructure law that was signed by Congress and the president. And so one has a target year of 23, fiscal year 23. However, others, and these are all dam related. Others, we are still watching to understand when that becomes available. Because we have a grants team in-house, we have the infrastructure to be constantly watching, getting updates, and understanding the dynamic nature of these funding opportunities. There are some things that we would want to do in advance of even knowing when these may come out to help align these projects and initiatives with potential funding sources. And stakeholder engagement, as I talked about before, sounded very community focused, but also our regulatory agencies, Army Corps, FEMA, and actually your representatives for this district are very key stakeholders in helping this project, I would say, grow legs in the eyes of funding. And so, the first thing we would look at is the local mitigation strategy that is typically put together by the county, and make sure that this project is on that list. It is, which is great, which helps us when some of the FEMA grants come out, already have the eligibility requirement taken care of.
We are number 21.
We can work on that. Let's try to raise that ranking. Again, these dams are classified as high hazard potential, which does give this project a lot of opportunity for funding, especially through some of these newer grant sources, which are specific for high hazard potential dams. Again, we don't have a timing or target yet. Another approach that we recommend is to potentially put in a request for appropriations. Actually, we noticed that the cycle just closed a week ago for this year. But with the time that we have ahead of us for next year's cycle, we would recommend scheduling meetings with the representatives and the congresswoman and start to present the project and program in a way that we can get some funding earmarked for the project. So again, early on in this process, we kind of map out a plan and a strategy, and again, kind of as our whole theme is being flexible, we head down that path, but as we learn of new opportunities or we assemble and there may be some funding opportunities we haven't seen yet that we can become available for.
Back to me. Another thing that I learned as we were prepping for this meeting pertaining to the grants is that if you were to contract with an engineer from start to finish, all the way through construction, before you apply for the grant, then you could get no grant funding toward the engineering assistance. So if we do this in pieces, or we take a small step at a time, and then identify a grant at that time, you may be able to qualify for grant funding that would also help pay for the engineering design. Okay, so the other parts of task 2 were investigations. That's a critical part because you guys have a lot of reports, a lot of prior investigations have been done on the dams. You've had underwater inspections, you've had surveys, you've had geotechnical explorations, seepage analysis. So a lot has been done, and we don't want to come in and redo that, and we don't want to waste that effort. We would need to review it, kind of do a high-level third-party review to do some spot checks on maybe some of the seepage calculations, utilizing the boring information that's part of the geotechnical reports. We want to evaluate the H&H modeling that's available. We know that there's recently been an emergency action plan developed. I believe the state, I don't know if they did that independent of you guys, or they assisted you with the emergency action plan?
I know they assisted in the funding, and I know Tracy Wood was actively involved in it.
Okay. So that, when you do an emergency action plan, they have to have a hydrology model put together for that. So it would have, we would want to review that because we've done emergency action plans ourselves, and when you're on that side of it as the engineer that's doing the emergency action plan, you want to look at the most conservative condition possible, so that when you fail the dam in your models, you're going to get the largest breach wave to move downstream that's going to do the most damage, because you don't want to miss anything. You don't want to say the flood inundation limits are going to get this far, and then if it really happens, they get this far. So if anything, you want to be conservative, and then if it really happens, they're this far. So that's fine. So all the assumptions that go into that model, whoever put the model together, they probably leaned on the conservative side with all of their assumptions. So from your perspective, as the dam owner wanting to do dam improvement projects and having to have the capacity to pass all that water, you want it to be, I don't want to say less conservative, but you want it to be more realistic. You want to take any over-conservatism out of the model and have a realistic model. So a couple things we thought that we definitely want to get our hands on the model to review, or to see, did they consider any upstream watershed storage? There's bound to be natural depressions. We get the LIDAR mapping of the area, bound to be natural depressions in the watershed ponds that are upstream of your development that would help to hold some water. We want to see what the infiltration rate they use for the soils. We know that the soils in this area can be pretty sandy and highly impervious, or highly pervious, I should say. And there's an opportunity maybe to adjust some parameters in the model, again, to get it more realistic, not to just change the answer, but to make sure that we take the over-conservatism out of it and get a true reflection on the volume of water that would be entering your dam system, and then what the time would need to be to pass. So things like that we think are definitely important in the initial phase, and then there could be some data gaps that we recognize where maybe we need to send out surveyors to pick up some additional field information, or maybe there's some additional geotechnical borings at a couple locations. Or maybe we also thought we might want to put up some monitoring areas to quantify how much seepage is coming through the dams we could put together a collection area and monitor that and evaluate that. So in the investigation phase, we want to review everything that's been done, kind of make sure that we agree with it and accept it, and then move forward from there. And then the other part of that task was what we had listed as preliminary design. I would like to change that and call it conceptual design, because at this point in the project, we would have all the information and all the data gathered, and we would start to have ideas on what needs to be done, and just from a high level, maybe throw out some key ideas of what needs to be done here and there, but not get into a detailed, CAD drawings or anything like that at that point. Just keep it at a concept level design, and that would be the ending of task 2. So as far as questions go, do you like this format? I'm going through all your questions and trying to give an explanation of our project approach.
No, I'm fine with it. You've already prepared to do it that way, so, we'll just make sure when we're done, if the people that ask the questions, if there was satisfactory answers or not, or any more information.
I just feel like I'm talking a lot.
No.
I've probably already tripled my normal amount of words per day. Okay, so the questions we have relating to task 2. Question, how are you going to validate data that and comments from existing reports on items like seepage, settling, stability factor, drawdown requirements, etc.? We have geotechnical engineers and geologists at Hanson. We would definitely give them the raw data that was contained in the geotechnical reports, have them do a couple of spot checks on seepage analysis to make sure that they agree with the results that are in the report. We would also want to get our geotechnical engineer out here to do a personal inspection, walk around, get a feel for every dam. He's the guy that I have in mind. He's been doing this at Hanson for a couple decades now, and I'm sure that if we looked at his resume, he regularly performs dam inspections and levee inspections. He spends more time in the field than in the office doing this type of work, and he would be a great resource to get out here and get his opinion, have him really go around and check and probe and get his own independent evaluation of the conditions. And then it's obviously starting with the baseline of the previous dam assessment report. So the next question was, the overall project consists of the dams for the 3 lakes. Can the work be done in 3 phases? I would say generally yes. We would look at the 3 different dams and try to define the various risks associated with each one of those, the state of the conditions for each one of them. The one that had maybe turns out one of them is in the most deteriorated shape and has the highest risk associated with it. Obviously, that would be the first dam that we would want to get some action taken on. But we can be flexible on that. We could look at, it may tie too to the grant funding, I'm not sure, but we can look at doing all 3 of them as a single package or breaking them up as individual dams.
Yeah, I go back to my comment about the funding from the assessment that was approved. It's up to $2,400 a year per lake lot owner, and that's about $1 million a year is what that is. But then we've still got some expenses for maintenance and things like that, so it's not fully $1 million a year. So if we say we've got a multi-million-dollar project here, then that can't be done short of some other sources of funding to do it in a very quick time frame.
I agree with that. Our next question stated, I would like a list of flood control gate styles installed during projects managed by the proposed project manager. For instance, overshot versus undershot gates, radial, lip, screw, etc. I would also like to know their perceived pros and cons of the various style type combinations. Address points should include installation costs, lifetime maintenance costs, reliability, ease of operation, ease of determining discharge rates, etc. So I went through, we have a project that was listed in our proposal. It was the Stratton Lock and Dam project. It was a gate replacement and a lock extension project up in Illinois. And in the gate replacement, the existing or the previous gates were sluice gates. There are 4 sluice gates on that project. And what we did as part of that project, we put together a decision matrix on various gate types. So we looked at vertical roller gates, we looked at Tainer gates, and we looked at hinge crested gates. And we did a comparison of those different styles of gates, and a lot of the parameters that were listed in this question were part of our decision matrix. I brought a little bit of material with me. I didn't think that the general audience would be interested in this level of detail, but this is part of some of the graphics from our report on the different gate types. It's got the pros and cons of each gate type and the cost of those. So just from a cost perspective, it would vary depending on the site specifics of the application. In our case with this project, the most expensive was a vertical roller gate. The least expensive was the Tainer gate. The gate we actually chose for the project was the hinge crested gate, and that was, but the cost between them didn't vary that much on that project. It was a large project on the Fox River up by Chicago, but the cost varied from $6.6 million to $7.9 million. The gate we went with was the hinge crested. That was in the middle at $7.2 million. But again, I think depending on the project, the order of the cost could completely flip around. And what I would recommend, if we got into any gate issues on this project, I'm not sure that we will, but if we did, and one thing we did on this project is we met with the gate manufacturer. We used Rodney Hunt. They're one of the leading gate manufacturers in the country. And you know, as much research as we can do as engineers and get understanding of various gates, they are the professionals in the gate industry, and getting information from them specific to your project would be the recommended way to go with that. I've got some material here. Afterwards, I can meet with whoever is interested in the gate question and get into a little more detail on that. Okay. Our next question deals with the drawdown valves. It says they've been repaired but have limited remaining life. What are the concepts for new drawdown devices and spillways? Is it possible that valves can be located on the discharge side of the dam for ease of maintenance and change out when necessary? This was a question that we intended Ken to answer. I'm going to put Justin on the spot and have him answer it. I'm putting him too much on the spot. I have an answer.
You have an answer.
You want me to answer it? I put him on the spot. I owe him a drink. Putting the drawdown valves on the downstream side of the dam is not ideal. In fact, it's probably a bad idea, because when you have the drawdown valve on the upstream, it's harder to get to. It's in the pool of the dam or of the lake, so you either have to go out by boat or you have some kind of temporary or permanent catwalk out there. But when you have the valve in the water there, the rest of the pipe is currently empty. It's just air in there, so there's no pressure on the system. If you move the valve to the other side of the dam and put it on there, you're going to have a pressurized column of water in there. We already know that there's leaks in there now, so even a brand new one eventually over time may develop leaks. And if you have a pressurized water sitting in that pipe, then that's a bad dam design. So from that perspective, no, we would not want to move it over there. But putting a catwalk out there with you could put a gate, a lock gate. So you know, typically what you're trying to prevent is teenagers from getting out there and messing around with stuff. They may think it's funny to open up the gates at midnight and then everybody wake up in the morning and your lake is halfway dry. So you want to lock that stuff up and prevent accidents. And it's safety too. You want to have that all locked up. The next question was, will codes allow sidewalks, buried utilities, guardrails on the north dam? And the simple answer to that is mostly yes. Anything on the surface is not a problem for the dam. We could put sidewalks on them, just like you have the roadways there now. The guardrail should not be an issue. We would just verify that the design of the guardrail didn't have the post penetrating so deep that they got into any area that may be concerning from water levels in the future, but those aren't issues. The utilities could be an issue. Ideally, you would put a utility in parallel with the dam alignment, and ideally, I guess, put that on the downstream side if you have the opportunity there. Any utilities crossing traversely through the dam would just be another future piping opportunity for water to get through the embankment. The next question is, sheet piling was installed in 2013 on the South Lake Dam. Additional sheet piling is suggested in the capital improvement plan for over $1 million. What are your thoughts on this?
That one is for me.
That one is.
Yeah, I pulled that permit and I read through it, and like I said earlier, I talked to Cammy about this, on the Water Management District side that was responsible for issuing that permit. And I don't have a ton of visibility into the CIP to know exactly where they were proposing that, and where that was proposed. But what we want to do with all of this is these types of things will work into our overall approach of assessing these things and determining exactly what is the best solution to move forward with at each given location. So,
we don't know yet, but
we don't know.
we'll evaluate it. And then the next question was, what staff are located in Jacksonville? Okay, these two. And can they handle all the site needs without others incurring travel costs, me, to the project? And I would say for the most part, yes. I think and there's additional staff in both of in Kimley Horn's office, in Hanson's office, and in Bergman's office. We all have a staff that have some proficiency in this type of disciplines that are required with this project. But I'll let
I can speak.
you guys answer.
Kimley Horn has been in Jacksonville since 1996. We have about 75 people. We've actually done a lot of work in this area, more on the site civil side. We've done a few communities in this area and roadway work. I support, again, more wet infrastructure projects, which takes me, I'm usually in the other seat where I'm far away, so I'm really excited to be a part of a local project. And the work that we're doing for the Corps and how we assemble is always with the project in mind, in terms of, first of all, having the best resource, but also delivering our services efficiently and effectively. I think from the community standpoint, I would anticipate being involved even at some of the technical engineering, led meetings on specifics of the dam, which maybe isn't my expertise, just to help understand the community, understand the concerns, and work with the team on constantly refining that communication strategy, because this project is large and will impact a lot of people, and I think communication's paramount.
To pile onto that a little bit too, that was a big consideration in our survey of geotechnical consultant selections, that they could be here to perform the work without extra travel. They're local. Those same considerations went into us selecting them to work with us on the Army Corps contract too, because that's a southeast region, so we need to be able to get anywhere in that region, and that was part of it.
Okay. So our next, that's the questions that we had for task 2. Our next task, after we complete all of the review of the data, do additional data collection, and come up with concept design, would be to move into what we have listed here as design documents preparation. That would really be the construction drawings. And we would phase that out. We would initially develop a set of 30% design drawings. Those would be high-level engineering drawings. We would have a lot of the information that we obtained from our surveyors, invert elevations, and a CAD layout of the proposed plan, an initial opinion of cost, what it would take to construct that project, and maybe a couple details on some of the specific components of the project. But it would basically be that initial pulling together of a set of plans with some key elements to it. We would then move into the 60% drawings, where we would get more detail. We would make sure that we got in at that point some plan profiles, cross sections, more detail on the design components. We would revise the opinion of engineering construction costs for that, and get some general notes, and maybe even start to lay out the specifications to go with the plans and specs at that point. And the 60% set is usually what we would then reach out to a permitting agency for their initial comments and review at that point. So they would have enough detail in the drawings to reach out and get some additional comments back. And we would take those comments, refine them even further to what we would call a 90% set of plans. And from our perspective, when you have the 90% drawings, that would be what we'll look at as the final drawings that a contractor would pick up and build the project from. So we would put everything in there required for a contractor to actually build the project. We would address all the comments received from the board, any other stakeholders, from the permitting agencies, and then put that out again for one last final review, and then take those final comments and then complete our 100% design package. That would include the final opinion of cost, all the details and the specifications required, so we could hand that over to a contractor to build the project. So as far as questions go related to that, we have a question: what is the best practice for repair or replacement of the drawdown pipes under the dam? Is it likely we will have to drain the lakes for upgrades?
I can take a shot at that. Kim was going to help with this, but I can tell you a little bit about how the Army Corps did this, and I don't really think what we've seen so far right now. I don't think repair of these again is really an option since they've been repaired once. I think really what we're looking at is replacement of some kind. So if let's say we were going to replace them, you have to dewater the area. So what that looks like is a cofferdam on the upstream and downstream end of the structure, and you degrade the dam at that point. Remove the old pipe and build the dam back up. You have to dewater during that time to achieve compaction underneath the culvert, as well as the proper compaction in the bank. So that's kind of what a proper excavation, removal, and replacement would look like for this. There are challenges with that, especially on the North Dam, where you're so close to Black Creek, and getting in that proper cofferdam there would be challenging. But this is again the stuff that we would be looking at during our study and evaluation of the solution.
Yeah, I agree with Justin's comment about we're probably looking at replacement, not repair. There were some additional comments in the dam assessment report that talked about some pipes that appeared to have collapsed in, I forget which dam that was on. A lot of seepage problems within the drawdown pipes, with water seeping into the pipes, water seeping out of the pipes. And one option would be to fill the pipes with grout, but there's also comments about piping along the exterior of the pipes that's a concern from the reports. And it may, we will look at all options, but from the information that we've seen so far, it looks like removing the pipes that are there now, because they have a lot of deterioration and adverse issues with them, and replacing them with new pipes in the same location that takes care of two problems. That way you're not abandoning a pipe and still probably leaving what may be a problem in place. That can be fixed, and then you can get the new pipes replaced with their capacity and upgraded so that we don't have those seepage issues anymore.
Just, if I can interrupt you just a minute, those pipe are 24 foot down. That's where the valve's at, it's 24 foot down. And we were hoping to eliminate that. And you don't, the other discussions that have gone on is you don't need to go down 24 foot. You don't need to ever open a valve at that level and draw the lake down to that amount. So,
Yeah.
but
I understand that.
I don't
yeah.
want to try to get into the details of engineering here, but that, you know,
Yeah, an option would be to maybe go halfway down with your inlet, and then you could probably do a drop manhole or something to step the water down to the downstream end of the dam. But again, we will want to have consideration for addressing any existing piping concerns that are,
Yeah.
if we backfill the existing drawdown pipe with grout, that may not eliminate the problems. We want to make sure that we have some reliability that we've cut off that.
I'm going to make one other comment. It's somewhat political, and I probably shouldn't do it, but you need to question very, very carefully the assessment of the existing reports and that sort of thing, because some of that I can almost guarantee you is not accurate. Some of it is probably 100% accurate. Okay, but if I'm still involved in the board and the project and all that, you can bet that you guys are hired. You can bet there's going to be a lot of discussion about that and a lot of information looked at. There's comments made and reports that were based on somebody talking to some other person out in the community that has no merit, really. So
And that's what we
be
want.
careful.
That's what we welcome with the whole process, is we want to collaborate with the board. We want to get all the information that you know, get your input.
But now, having said that, I'm not a damn engineer. I'm a metallurgical engineer by background. I know how to make steel, but I don't know how to do dams and stuff like that. And that'll be my last political comment, okay? To the community.
Our next task in the project would be on permitting. There's two primary agencies we expect will be involved with permitting. That's St. Johns River Water Management District and the Dam Safety Office at the state level. So Justin could talk about some of the permitting expectations we have with the Water Management District.
Of course, the Water Management District runs the ERP program, Environmental Resource Permit, and that's the same process you guys went through with the South Dam in 2013. The Water Management District has a certain set of criteria, the structure, whatever it is, whether it's a road, a dam, or a pond, it has to be designed to. Their criteria for this lake would require it to be designed to a PMF again, due to the volume of water that it retains. Then I had that discussion with Camden Dam regarding what was permitted in 2013 and the fact that the South Dam does not meet that criteria, but was issued a permit. It's somewhat under duress given the situation. So what our goal would be, I think, in this project is to be able to get all of these structures to a point where they meet all current regulatory criteria, so that we all sleep well at night in and around these things and having our names attached to them. So from a permitting standpoint, that would be our goal.
In our contact with the State Dam Safety Office was Ken had talked with Tracy Woods. He's known her from the past, and he's talked to her specifically about this project. He said she is a helpful partner, definitely wants to see something done out here, but the details of the information that he was going to provide, I don't have. So I apologize for that.
She has been somewhat cooperative to us, but and you should have picked it up on the website. But in February of 2021, she issued a letter to us. It was pretty threatening. It pretty much said, you guys need to do some work on your dams. If you don't do it, then we can look at some, I forget what the right enforcement word was, but.
Yeah, well, the regulatory agencies are challenging like that sometimes.
Yeah.
That's her doing her job.
Right. But my point is that letter is still in existence because we've done some things and we've advised her of what we've done, like repairing valves and things like that. But I can tell you her comment to me was, when I became chairman, her comment to me was, we better not, don't think you're gonna be talking to me 5 years from now and the situation is where it is today. So she's, you know, that's, and I understand that. We understand that as a community, and I think we understand that as a board, so we've got things that we've obviously gotta do, and if that was the way she was trying to get our attention, she certainly did it. And she did her job, you know, I mean.
Yeah, because if, God forbid, we do have a dam failure out here, I mean, it's gonna be national news, and it's gonna, all the fingers are being pointing at her, and so she's got, you know, her job to do. All right, our next task is, just have a couple left, the bidding assistance, task, and that one's pretty straightforward. We have people at Hanson that deal, strictly with construction. So they'll help put together all the bidding assistance that you would need to get this advertised to contractors, answer any questions the contractor may have, help you review the submittals from the contractors. You don't, obviously, it's tempting to go with the lowest cost, but we want to do additional research on the contractors to make sure that they are qualified and that they have a reputable contractors. And we have people that will assist that all the way through to selecting the contractor. Our next task is stakeholder involvement and public engagement. So I'll let Kelly talk about that, and there is one question that I'll just throw out there so maybe she can address that as well. And it is, what success do you predict with funding assistance, grants, state revolving funds, etc.? And what is the possible timing?
Okay, I'll start with the stakeholder outreach and engagement. Our approach is definitely to provide a very transparent framework for communication between the project team and the board, and then onto the community as well. Thank you. Projects like this are dependent on a very transparent interaction between the community, stakeholders, like I mentioned before, the regulatory agencies, and also elected officials. At the beginning of the project, it may be more appropriate to have an educational phase. I'm sure a lot of this information may be very educational, but also overwhelming and at varying levels of detail. And so an educational strategy to onboard the community and new community members to the history of the project, and how decisions were made, and where we are today, so that we have a standing point for our making for as we make those decisions going forward. We early on will develop a strategy on what this outreach looks like. You know, and I think we can start with how will our team communicate with the board, and what is the framework for that, and establishing that. We host town hall meetings. We do newsletters, mailers, website, full websites for projects if necessary. We also have some platforms. Kimley-Horns has some platforms that give us some kind of map-based informational apps where people can learn things. I think earlier in the project, the communication strategy is different than when the project goes to construction. The frequency of information getting out to the public tends to be much faster in construction, and we want to make sure that the progress of construction is well communicated and people know what to expect. So there's kind of a range of maybe an educational phase, and again, we can work with, you have a website, which we've all been using as an educational tool to learn about this project and your community. We can work with you guys to develop whatever strategy from whatever media platforms. Not everyone uses the web, because there needs to be, who's it dedicated, is there a phone number, what have you. We will work very close and somewhat as an extension of the community to help provide that conduit for communicating. And then on the grants, what is the success rate? Timing. So as I mentioned, the federal grants, we don't have a sense of timing at this moment, other than we're watching and looking like everyone else is. The FEMA grants, we have, there is a typical cycle that we do see annually. We actually, there's CDBG, a community development block grant, their mitigation program. This past cycle, 17 grants were issued. It's actually within the state. It is challenge, that's a small number for the number of submittals that they received. I will tell you that two of our grant writers, between two different grants, were able to get $26 million for two specific projects. So I wouldn't say that is a very competitive grant, but we have had success in securing that. There are some other ones out there. I do think, again, the risk and severity of the implications of a failure of museums, we will put a very strong submittal together and work really close with you guys to find that money. But at the end of the day, no grants are given. You have to, you have to build an application, you have to compete, you have to put a good business case forward, and so unfortunately I can't say you have a 100% chance of receiving funding.
All right. And then our last task, construction phase services. As I mentioned earlier, we have people that's all they do is manage construction projects. One thing I didn't mention earlier is these same people that will we recommend anyway, it'll be up to the district, but we recommend that you would have a project engineer on site coordinating with the contractor, making sure that everything that's in the design plans is being constructed and installed correctly in the field. But one thing that we would have the same person do is back when we're in the design development phase, putting together the drawings, and we have them do a constructability review to make sure that what we're putting out there to contractors is something that makes sense from how are they going to construct it. And one of the issues, like you said, would be in the depth of the water column. We want to go down 24 feet deep, or should we look at something that's maybe 10 or 12 feet deep that could serve the same purpose? So constructability does become an issue, definitely from that perspective, and we would have that review incorporated. And then that person would work with the contractor and make sure that the construction process is going according to plan and schedule. And that would be the end of the project from start to finish. It obviously is not, like I said earlier, it's not going to be a straight line. We'll work with you and be flexible along the project route to get that done. I did have one final question. I think somebody was being nice and they offered a softball question. It is, what does your firm bring to the table that other engineering firms do not? The main, I think my best answer for that, and quickest answer would be, as I said earlier, our joint venture between Kinley Horn, Hanson, and Bergman. We were ranked #1 by the Army Corps of Engineers for doing similar type projects to this. They're going to be large Army Corps projects, and they ranked us #1 for the Jacksonville district. So if we have that endorsement, I think that just speaks volumes for the capacity of our team. Yeah, we should. We're here.
Okay?
But
All right, let's, some of our board members didn't submit any questions, even though they may have some. They may have some, even the ones that submitted them may have additional questions based on what they've heard you present. So if we don't, why don't we start with, we'll do the community in a minute. You need to fill out a piece of paper, if you will. Okay. Did you give it to, can you get it from me? So we can look at it? So why don't we go with Tom first? You got any additional questions? I think they answered most of yours, but anything else?
Yeah, I think we all recognize we've got to do an evening game here. We've got priorities, we've got our annual assessment, cash flow report, and we may or may not have to go to the banks and borrow some money. And we're gonna have possibly grant money. So we've got to figure all this out, get it on paper, and make it make sense. in the infinite money world, how long would you think this project would take to start to finish? And then on the other side of the spectrum, and it might be also a question to the state, you know, how long will they let us drag it out if that's the before somebody throws a flag out on the field and says, hey, you guys can do this. That's where I'm trying to get my head around shortest and logical and oh shit.
I mean, it sounds like we've got a maximum of 5 years before Tracy is fed up, so we have a working window there. But if we were to go straight at it from start to finish with no problems, the design part of it, I don't want to throw out a timeline, but it could take quite a while. Definitely in the, we're not measuring this in weeks, we're definitely in months.
Increment of years, 3 years, 4 years.
I'd say the 5-year maximum, that doesn't worry me. It's not like I think this is going to take 5 years, not at all. Definitely not something that's going to be done in a year as far as the construction. Maybe the design, we might have the design all completed and maybe within a year looking to select a contractor.
We may spend,
I don't think that's unreasonable.
we may spend a good chunk of time acquiring permits. To some of those,
Yes.
sometimes there's an established time frame, like in the ERP process, for the district, the water management district, to make comments for that can be nailed down. But if it's DEP or the Corps gets involved with that permitting process, they don't have the same regulatory time frame. So those things can make it take longer. It depends on what the project ends up being. If it's replacing all the dams only from top to bottom, it's obviously a much larger time frame. You're not doing that, right? But just making it more, and it depends on how the project is defined.
Great, thank you.
But another part of the question, I think, was as far as Tracy and the Water Management District go, and 5 years and all that. I think if you guys show that you're making progress toward it, it's phased, even if we have a plan, a program to work through this over the next 5 or 10 years, as long as you're progressing towards these improvements, they might keep going better, but I don't think it would go further than that. I don't think it would go to, financial fines or anything like that, as long as you're really progressing, I think.
Okay. Just a clarification, the FDEP letter was written February 2021, so we've already racked through 1 year.
Yeah, that's what I thought I said that.
I didn't hear it.
Yeah, February 2021 is when I wrote the letter, and,
So we don't have 5 years.
well, but she still, the way that letter stands is we've updated her, and even after I became the chairman, I updated her several times verbally, not in writing, and it's been suggested I should follow that up with an email or something, but I didn't do it yet. But she says that she's going to send us a written response, but she's been saying that for 6 months now. And she hasn't done it. So I think I take that as good news, but it may be totally bad news. She may be talking to the lawyer right now. I don't know. I don't think so.
Yeah, I wish Tim was here to talk. We have a much more detailed conversation with her than.
Well, that would be interesting, assuming we go further, because I've had conversations with her. I've had conversations with Cammie Dewey, and obviously with previous engineers and even our advisory group. So there's things, I've made comments to the community in some of these meetings about things that they've told me, because I felt like that the community needed to know that. Mm-hmm. So I think that that is important, I think, from all of our standpoint, the board, but the community also, to know how it's to, because I think everybody in here knows Tracy Wood is somebody that's important and you need to be paying attention to. Right? Because
Definitely can't ignore her.
no, not at all. So, and she's been here. She's been here since we've had the letter in February of 2021. So Anyway. All right, Carol, did you have any?
Yeah, a lot of the questions I have are answered by the presentation and by tonight. Something that comes to mind, actually, based on a letter from Tom this week, Tom's my attorney. He said that we own, the county owns an easement on the North Dam, is that right? But not the roadway. That is how it appears. That's been a question. My question about that is in the phase where you're examining the information that we have, which doesn't have anything at all to do with that road. The North Dam Road is low on one end and high on the other. And the low end has been said to be our potential overtopping. So that needs to go in there somewhere because that was an unknown right up till today when I got that letter. As to who owned the roadway. Apparently we did. So that's one question that I don't think you can answer, but it's something that we need to look at. Another thing that I had a question about, this comes from the prior studies. How do you certify those prior studies? I mean, his comment is right on with where we're all at. We think there's some good information in them, and we think that there's some questionable information. How do you certify what you use and what you don't use?
Well, when we look at the geotechnical information, for example, so that's all based on borings, and those borings are documented in the back of the report. So basically, they put out a graphical representation of the soil column that's in there. So that's input parameter that would go into an analysis of seepage modeling for that. So we can take the raw data and do an independent analysis, and then we can see what do our seepage models show versus what they put in the geotechnical report. So that's as far as the geotechnical information goes. You look at the raw data, and it would be the same as whoever provided that raw data to that engineering firm versus we hire them and they provide that data to us. We have to take it that the data is reliable. When we look at survey information, that's where it gets a little trickier because you have a lot of good survey information on the dams, but how do you validate that the survey data is accurate? We would have to work with our surveyor to see what their opinion would be on that. You go out and spot check a few of the benchmarks that were put in place and verify that those are accurate, so then all the other points taken off of that are reasonably accurate.
So that's
But again, for us, we would hire a surveyor to provide us the elevation data, but we take that data and we have to trust that what the data the surveyor gave us is accurate.
you have a surveyor in your team.
Yes.
When you're talking about putting pipes in, and I think this is my last question, when you're talking about replacing pipes with pipes, at one time we were given a model which took all of the water out of the lake over the top and not down through pipes. I have no idea what became of that idea, but is there ever a thought that there's another way to move the water out of the lake into Black Creek other than the pipes through the dam?
Yeah, that'll happen naturally if you get more than 100 years.
I realize that.
But yeah, we would look at anything and everything as far as the capacity. If we have to go to that PMF level of design that I was talking about, that's a lot of water. And, you know, for any pipes, there's no pipe that's going to be able to even touch a small percentage of that amount of water. So then you're looking at the large culverts that you have for your overflow spillway. Even that would be nowhere near enough. And then you start to talk about a weir is going to be your most efficient way to move the water. So then you're looking at what can we do at the surface to pass that level of volume over without worry or without having the concern for failure of the dam. So it would need to be contained within an armor protected reach of the dam. So but you have the small spillway like on the North Dam right now that's there in concrete. Maybe that may need to be tripled, quadrupled, or whatever, something like that. Maybe there's a part of the road that would have to be dedicated to allow for overtopping, and it would have to be closed off and gated. we would have some type of monitoring alert signal that would require some emergency action if you have a really extreme event like that. There's another thing we can look at.
And that sounds really good, but the other side of this coin is we have people other than this board and our people that own a portion of our dam. And we have houses on the other side of the dam, and we have trees on the dam that we don't own. To me, those are complexities that are going to be looked at and dealt with.
Yeah, definitely will. The trees, I'm not sure when the state gave the district the authority to operate and maintain the dams, but there should be some legal avenue that when trees like that get established on a dam embankment, you're obligated as part of your maintenance of the dam to have those removed. If they're on somebody else's property, that can't prohibit that action from taking place. The dam, the priority of maintaining the dam and having that so that it doesn't fail versus somebody's appreciation for a tree on the property. When you put those two together, I don't know what the answer is, but I would think somehow in your authority to maintain the dam that you would trump that. But I don't know. It would have to be like that.
It's something that has to stay.
Oh, we'll deal with it. We're gonna deal with that.
Are these for you? No, I don't think these are for you. Janet, you want to address Norman's question too while if you've got any more?
Certainly, I will be addressing Norman's comment here,
Or at least bring it up. I mean, Kelly may have to address it, but.
But first I want to give a clarifying statement to Carol and the roads. I was at a county commission meeting back in October, and the county commissioner specifically stated that they own the roads over the dam. That is on a video recording, and it is validated by their attorney. So anybody want to check the videos for our October county commission meeting, it is there. I have a question, is part of the package that you all proposed, you kind of flirted in here with wastewater management. Is that considered a part of everything you do, or is that like an add-on service?
I believe, I know Kinley Horn and Hanson, we both do wastewater management projects. We have engineers that specialize in that. I don't know that that would be part of this project, unless you know something that we don't know.
Yeah.
And then Norman's question is, discuss the difference between a grant application and an appropriation request.
So, an appropriation request is, in essence, the process typically starts with a conversation, ideally with your representative, and to introduce the project. If you have time, having one-on-ones on the project is appropriate, and getting your representative to understand the project. And then it's actually just a letter requesting appropriations submitted, I believe it's to your local representative. The process of completing that letter and filling out that paperwork is simple. It is the work in advance to educate and kind of market the project and the need and the benefit that really makes that letter impactful. And then the money is earmarked at the final level.
Is
And my grants people can speak much more prolific about that process.
Is that from, it winds up being from grant money though?
No,
Or from
that's
something else.
It's earmarked.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
it's not a grant. It's-
Congress or the state write a bill, and in that bill
And
it
that bill
says
says
you
to
get
fund this
$10 million
project.
for your project.
Okay. All right. And that's something that Steve talked to me about
Yes.
earlier in the week.
I think the key to those is, again, it's a year out before the next cycle. It's educating your representative.
Were you aware that existed, the appropriation request process? Okay.
That's one thing we watch real closely with ACEC. They actually have a regulatory subcommittee that follows very closely with all the bills on the state level. All the bills that get proposed and which ones have traction.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to be critical. I mean, Janet, we forced that down her throat to get into grants and all that. And so I called her after Steve called me and said, hey, we got something coming up, but you don't have a contract with us and it's probably too pushy to do and you're probably not, timing's not good on it either. But he mentioned that and I talked with Janet about the appropriation request and she wasn't aware of it. Now, he also told me that grants and this whole process of getting money is not, it's not simple as falling off a tree either. So it sounds like that we missed an opportunity. If we'd been 6 months ago, we would have probably been trying to capitalize on this opportunity. Okay.
There's always another water bill.
Yeah, you didn't miss the opportunity, you just missed this cycle.
Yeah, okay, but we missed it for this cycle. Yeah, all right.
Especially
Okay, any other question?
No, just defining our project will be really hard at this point, so.
Do what now?
Defining our project for that appropriation fund will be a little difficult at this point.
It might be. That's the reason we're having this meeting today. Well,
that's what I'm just looking at.
okay. All right, so, Matt, do you have any other questions?
Yeah, just a couple of quick questions. For dams that were built in the 60s, obviously there's been a lot of new developments in earthen dam / levee design and rehabilitations. What are some cutting edge techniques that could possibly be considered for rehabilitation of earthen dams?
I would have to say that not necessarily any great advancements in that. We have dams that are 100 years old or more that they're, just because of their age, they're not an imminent threat of failure. When we look at, I've been to some seminars that had presentations about dam failures, and there's not necessarily a correlation between age of dam and failure of dam. So, in fact, when you look at a lot of the concrete dams that were built 100 years ago, the amount of concrete and the strength of the concrete that they put into those versus maybe what would be done today, you may say that they were more stout back then. So I don't know that there's a cutting edge technology from a construction standpoint. I bet there are. There's probably a lot of methods and means that a contractor can use to construct various pieces, but the general dam itself is you have to have that impermeable core within the dam that keeps the water from seeping through. All dams leak. I learned that early on, that having some seepage through a dam, that's not a problem. Having the water come through, you just don't want the water to come through in large volumes or to be pulling any material with it. But having some water come through a dam is not a problem. Typically, there's a tow drain on the downstream end of the dam to collect that water and bring it to a point and discharge it. So it's part of the design. But as far as cutting edge technology in dam design, I don't know that there's markedly different.
There are different things. Like if you look at what the Corps is doing for HHD, that's an earthen dam, and degrading it and recompacting it with appropriate fill and things like that, not necessarily an option. They're installing sheet pile and drilled and grouted cutoff wall to manage the seepage. So, and then they're also, to buy down the risk of failure of the embankment, replacing the culverts. And the culverts have all kinds of additional zone embankments and seepage control measures built in with them when they do that. So I would say that that's probably the latest and greatest in terms of managing the seepage for the earthen dam.
Okay. And second unrelated question, what's your opinion on the magnitude of risk introduced with utility poles in earthen dams?
I mean, the utility poles, if I'll just grab this one, but they're, like we were talking about earlier, the biggest risk of seepage and failure of a dam is from transverse penetration. So a pole sticking straight into it is not great, but depending on the depth and whatnot, it's not necessarily a risk, especially if it's anticipated.
Okay, thank you.
That it? Okay, Larry, how about you? I'll get you in a minute, Carl. Larry didn't have anything, so we'll see. How about, you don't have anything? Jerry?
Just one question, on the grants, are they matching grants?
Most of them are each, and I can prepare a table and get that over to you guys of what we looked at so far. But the matching varies. Some you can match with another funding source. It all varies from grant to grant.
Always comes down to money.
Yeah. All right. Anything else? Carl, do you have other questions?
Well, I wrote down 12, but I'm not gonna ask them. I do wanna make a comment. Back to the roadway. Approximately 2009, I was a meeting with the county commissioners, the chairman, county attorney, and the county administrator. And I was asking about guardrails on the South Lake, on the North Lake, on Lake Asbury Dam. And they advised me that they did not own the roadway, but they would consider including guardrails in the budget, which was later taken out. So just a piece of information.
2009, 2021.
Who knows?
Something
Just a comment.
It really boils down to
I'm through.
what they say, but what's recorded.
Yeah.
So,
That's it.
we went with
That's it? Okay, I've got a few community questions. I'll just go ahead and read them, because I think, rather than have you stand up. Dan, you don't want to stand up, do you? I'll read it for you. You want to know, it says, will you have a plan to safely draw down the lakes in the event of a big hurricane while replacing the phase or the present drawdown valves? Obviously, I guess the right answer would be don't do it during hurricane season.
That's a tricky thing, right? Because
Yeah.
the construction does take a while.
Yep.
Ideally, you're not doing construction during hurricane season, but that's all part of the plan. And there's if the lake even has to be drawn down. But when you take a culvert out of surface that you rely on for discharge of the lake, you got to replace it with something during construction. Usually, it's a bypass pumping system or something along those lines to replace the capacity of that during construction. So it would be a consideration.
Yeah, the size of the drawdown pipe that you have is not beyond the pumping capacity that would be brought in to offset the downtime for that.
It would be a requirement of construction contract if the contractor would
Okay.
provide that,
Yeah, and-
have it there ready, or within a certain amount of time be available.
And for your information, we in fact, when one of the valves on the North Lake wasn't working and we hadn't repaired it, we put a siphon system in to satisfy the state at that time. Now, not without some issues, but, okay. So there will be some possibilities, and that will be taken into consideration. Does that answer it? Okay. Rebecca, what happens if you go over budget? Will we be penalized? Will fees be needed monthly or annually? And then the last question also, do people with homes on the dam via Black Creek side responsible for helping also? We cannot go over budget. You gotta help us get some money somewhere, grants. We cannot. And that's the reason I talked about doing it in phases too, is we can't overcommit I mean, we've got a serious enough problem with increasing our assessment from $600 up to $2,400. And we cannot go over that. And that was the reason I asked the question about doing things in phases. That's the reason for that, because I like the answer. The answer was good because you go by the risk assessment of where is our major risk? You know, you got 3 dams. Well, which one is a major one? It's not Lake Ryan. That's only a 5-acre lake. You know, it's the North Lake. So that's got to be our starting point, our priority. But we cannot and will not, as long as I'm involved, go over that budget. And if you said, somebody says, oh no, we gotta have more money out of you, then it's gonna have to be a referendum submitted that has to pass by the majority of the, I forget the actual wording, that got us in trouble too, but, you know, it's gotta be passed by the Lakeline owners, or the residents. I'm sorry?
But you can't get blood out of the turnip.
I'm not gonna answer that. Yeah, that's not your name on here anyway. But will fees be needed monthly or annually? The assessment, the referendum that was voted on October the 12th, was an annual assessment. There is a way that you can do some kind of something, and Carl will talk about that at the next meeting probably, but you can fill out some kind of paperwork with the county tax collector office, and you can pay on a quarterly basis rather than on an annual basis. But as far as any other things, it's an assessment in with your taxes, but it's not a tax, it's an assessment. They told me not to say anything about it being a tax, it's an assessment. So the people on the dam on the other side, the Black Creek side, they have at this point no responsibility for helping us in the payment of this at all. Now, that sort of ties in with what Janet was talking about, not Janet, but Carol was talking about with this whole roadway and, you know, and trees on that property and all that kind of stuff. So that is a serious consideration that's gonna have to be addressed. It's been avoided for 20 years or better. And we've not, but the other side of that is we've not done, we own some of that property on the downside of the dam too, and it's got trees out the yang on it. So you know, that's kind of the pot calling the kettle black. So there's that, and then, let's see, this is, Maurice saying, I understand that Lance is not responsible for the Lake Lark Dam. And I think you guys are aware that there's another dam here in the complex. Is there any way to work with the owner of that dam to ensure it will not fail and destroy all the work we've been paying for to repair the other 3 dams? And the Tracy Woods with the state is responsible and has done work with that particular owner. And they've got a fair rating on that dam, but I've never seen the actual write-up. I would suggest that you guys, if we hire you, you need to look at that, because it's not, you know, it's not really designed any differently than what ours are, and I doubt that it would do any more than the 100-year design criteria. So now, what we do about that, I don't know, but certainly you can't. I agree with this statement in question. Is you can't ignore that. That needs to be addressed too.
Well, would it be appropriate to say that you guys could easily consider the PMP discharge rate from that lake into our system as part of the analysis?
Oh, yeah, it has to go in. Yeah, it has to be part of it. We can't ignore that. So it's coming in, whether somebody else owns it or not. So we wouldn't, obviously there'd be no repairs recommended for that dam, but the impact that it has on the downstream receiving areas has to be counted for.
Right. Do we have some other questions?
I have one here from Mike Felter. 2 questions. First is, who is Lance contracting with? Hanson or KBH?
Hanson.
Hanson, okay. Second, to Brian, regarding high-risk, high-cost construction. What have you seen in construction costs, inflation over the past 3 months?
Yeah, over the past couple of years, even construction costs have skyrocketed. We'll put, typically when we do our cost estimating, we will put an inflated rate to account for that. Because if you can look at costs that will come in the last 3 months or 6 months, and you cannot rely on those for projecting what the cost will be today. So there's definitely it's got to end at some point, but we're not out of it yet, so there's still going to be an inflated rate on any construction.
I have one more little question. I've looked at your insurance that you presented us with. Your umbrellas and claims made, what kind of tail do you have? Extended reporting period.
I do not know the answer to that, I'm
Well,
sorry.
if you don't, you can let me know,
Okay.
but that is important to us to know how long you have. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, is there, Shirley, you have any more from the audience? All right, any more from the board? All right, how about you guys? You have any questions for us as a community or as a board? Because like I said at the beginning, this is a joint venture here. It's not a us and y'all. I mean, we were interested in finding out more information about you. And are there any questions that you guys have?
Initially, we were concerned with the size of the district and the size of the project that this is going to require. You've already said that you've already increased your assessment, and you're looking at basically bringing in additional money that could get all the way up to $1 million a year. So you have a lot more funding than we feared initially when we were coming into this project. We still recognize, though, that getting assistance from the state or federal grant money is going to be ideal for your position, and we wouldn't back off that. We would continue with that. But as far as questions for you, we would just ask that it'd be a collaborative process, and that when we have meetings, or we need information or ask for information or decisions to be made, that we get quick consensus and we continue moving the project forward. So we would just ask for ability of the board to support the project and assist us as we need.
Okay, all right, appreciate that. I think that more or less that kind of concludes the meeting. I guess you'd say, well, what's the next steps? The next steps are we have a board meeting on May the 2nd, and at that meeting, we need to decide what the next step is going to be. And the way I would understand it, and correct me if you see it differently, is we say, we've reviewed your qualifications, you've given us presentations, you've answered questions. Now we have to decide, do we want to go forward with you? I guess you need to say, do you want to go forward with us too, based on the same criteria so far? But if that's the case, then we need to ask you for a monetary proposal with scope and start working on the scope and the proposal, realizing some of the questions and things we talked about here about a phased approach is probably going to be necessary. You spelled out about 2 years, kind of best case, I think, about a year of permitting and design and all that stuff, and then a year of construction. But I assume you're doing everything, and we ain't gonna be able to do that. So we probably need to look at it at the financing part from what the priority is, and I and everybody else probably assumes it's a North Lake. There's some comments and concerns about Lake Ryan because it doesn't have a spillway, but it's a 5-acre lake too, and I don't know. I'm not, the calculations on flow and discharge of that and saying that it won't withstand a 25-year flood is, we had a little more than that when Irma came through. So I don't, that's an example of some questionable stuff, maybe totally accurate, I don't know. But, so that's where we would go in the next step. We meet on the 2nd. I would anticipate that we will have discussion, and then we will have, we'll put that to a vote whether we go the next step. The next step does not, this is for everybody, does not mean that we've got an acceptable financial proposal, and because then that will have to be the next approval process.
And the contracting language as well.
Right.
Get the lawyers to agree on everything.
Right.
So that, there would be a couple steps.
Does that sound reasonable then? Okay, any other questions on this subject? Okay, motion to resign, retire the meeting, or whatever you call it.
Second.
All right. We thank you very much for coming, and any questions that are left unanswered, then you'll just have to tell your other guy, Captain, or whatever.
Thank you, John.
You have to tell him it was a terrible meeting, here's all these questions that he needs to answer.
Thank you.